A top member of the Senate Judiciary Committee says he is, quote, 99% sure there will be some criminal charges from the Russia investigation. Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut tells Politico that Michael Flynn and Paul Manafort are almost certain to be indicted. Meanwhile, CNN says the IRS is now sharing information with special counsel Robert Mueller about key Trump campaign officials. Investigators are reportedly scouring documents that date back over a decade in the hunt for potential tax and financial crimes. And Mueller's team will reportedly begin interviewing White House officials this week. Joining us now, ranking member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. Roger Stone met with the committee yesterday. What did you guys find out?
Well, and I can really only talk about what Mr. Stone has admitted publicly, but here's the significance of Mr. Stone. He worked on the campaign. He encouraged the president to hire Paul Manafort as his campaign manager. After he leaves the campaign, he's acknowledged being in continual contact with the president. And during all of this, he's also in touch with Russian intelligence, that is Guccifer 2. Through a non-public channel, he's communicating with Guccifer 2, and he's also in communication with WikiLeaks. Now, at times he said publicly that he was in direct communication with Julian Assange. Other times he said through an intermediary. Obviously, we want to know about those communications because they're taking place at a time when the Russians are using those two outlets as a way of dumping their stolen documents. Mr. Stone wasn't willing to answer questions about that intermediary. We're going to have to subpoena him unless he changes his mind and decides that, as he promised, he would answer every question. Because obviously we want to know whether that intermediary was in contact with other people on the Trump campaign, since WikiLeaks was obviously doing the work of the Russian propaganda operation. So
Congressman, wasn't Roger Stone also the one that predicted that John Podesta was about to come under an intense spotlight right before the Russians started leaking his documents through WikiLeaks?
Yes, he was the one who said that John Podesta's time in the barrel would come. This was before Podesta even knew he had been hacked. And then later on in October said basically the payload was coming, and that's when the Podesta emails started to be dumped. Now, he has his own explanation for that, which I will leave it to him to explain. But nonetheless, it is obviously a cause of great interest to our committee.
Casey.
Congressman Schiff, nice to see you. I wanted to ask you about your counterpart on the Senate side, Mark Warner, has been very focused on the role, particularly of Facebook, in this investigation. Are you happy with how forthcoming Facebook specifically has been? Have they given you everything you needed? And do you feel like you need to see Mark Zuckerberg, their top CEO, testify in public about this?
We are deeply interested in the whole use of social media by the Russians, including what they were doing on the Facebook platform. I've had a number of conversations now with Mark Zuckerberg, as well as their technology officers and others at Facebook. We are getting information from Facebook. I have concerns about how long it took Facebook to realize the Russians were advertising on their platform. As recently as July, they didn't think that was going on. And of most particular interest is the question of whether the targeting of these advertisements or the targeting of how they were pushing out negative news or organizing rallies was somehow coordinated with the campaign. Was it too sophisticated not to have used the data analytics of the campaign? These are key questions. I think there is bipartisan interest in having these social media companies, not just Facebook, but Twitter too, come and testify in open session before our committee. I'd like to see, frankly, us have the opportunity to display these ads for the public, because you really need to see them, I'm convinced, to recognize how cynical an effort this was by the Kremlin, how they sought to just accentuate those divisions that Tom Brokaw was just talking about and drive American against American, because being forearmed here is being forewarned. And as the Russians may very well do this again, showing this, exposing it to the public light is the best way to combat it.
Congressman Nick Confessori, in the ads that you've seen, are Clinton or Trump ever mentioned? Are these campaign-style ads or more generally about issues? Do we have any real evidence here of operational coordination or intervention in the election sense?
We are going to be getting the ads imminently, either this week or next. At this point, we've had the ads briefed to us. And my understanding is that, yes, in some cases, these ads mention candidates by name. And even when they don't mention the candidates by name, it's clear that they're attempting to exploit issues that are an advantage to one campaign. Because they're promoting an anti-immigrant message or an anti-Muslim message, messages that dovetailed very nicely with what the Trump campaign was trying to push. And the question is, what was the level of sophistication in the targeting of this? On that very seminal issue, we don't know enough yet. After all, it was only recently disclosed by Facebook that they were doing advertising on the platform. And the other thing I want to say is we only know about potentially a small portion of the Russian use of social media. This advertising that Facebook has identified only goes to money flowing out of Russia that they could identify. Expenditures coming from Russia by way of third countries in Eastern Europe or the Caucasus are not part, as I understand, of that sample. So this could be just a small piece of the advertising only a small piece of the broader Russian presence on Facebook, and Facebook only being a small piece of the social media presence overall of the Russians.
Right. Congressman, really quickly, do you agree with Senator Blumenthal's assessment regarding the likelihood of indictment for Manafort and Flynn?
Well, it certainly looks like by the public actions that those cases are reaching a head. If you believe Mr. Stone, and there's a very big if there, he has said publicly that he spoke with Mr. Manafort, and Manafort confirmed that he'd been told he would be indicted. But I don't have this coming from the special counsel. That's not the kind of coordination, although we are coordinating, that we're doing in terms of special counsel telling us their plans on charges.
Yeah. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you very much.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.